Hi everybody, this is Bastiaan, and today we're going to take a look at the virtually unknown variation of the Alekhine's defense called the O'Sullivan's Gambit. So I'm playing an engine called Hotbabe chess, which I've played before on YouTube. I'm playing black. White starts with e4, knight to f6, sourcing Alekhine's defense. e5, typical continuation, knight to d5, and d4. So now white has a strong control of the center, and I play b5, which is the O'Sullivan's Gambit, which looks a little bit odd because white can simply recapture the pawn on b5, which he does. You'll almost always see displayed bishop takes pawn on b5, and it's mathematically best, of course, and the most logical. Now I continue with pawn to c5, offering up a second pawn, and even offering a discovered attack for queen takes on knight on d5. So if white doesn't recapture the pawn, I can play pawn takes pawn, and white's center will be weakened. White can think of moves like c3. So if pawn takes pawn, pawn recaptures, and white still has a center, but this would lose after queen a5 check with a discovered attack on the bishop. So white is somewhat limited in his options. Engine plays pawn takes pawn. So now white is down, black is down 2 pawns, and has a discovered attack on the knight on d5. Furthermore, black can play typical play like d6 to take on the center because of the pin of the bishop that's been developed to b5. And now we can see the point of the 2 pawn sacrifice, queen to a5. So I'm getting a discovered attack on the bishop, but white has a discovered attack on the knight on d5. And the question is, if after both minor pieces are exchanged, who will have the better game or the best position? And with 2 pawns down, still it's actually black that has the best position under these circumstances. Now there are a few things white can try. Knight c3 fails because of knight takes knight. White is down a piece. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes with a fork, so that can be played. If queen d2, then queen takes bishop, and we will see a continuation much like the one that was played. Knight d2 is an interesting idea. It blocks the attack on black's knight. Queen takes bishop, and then c4, forking both pieces, protected by the knight. Queen takes pawn, pawn takes knight, and queen takes pawn. Now black has regained his 2 gambit pawns and is able to develop his bishop on a6. And it's still black that has the better game, even though material wise it is equal. But after pawn takes, queen takes, the move c3 was played. So queen takes bishop, queen takes knight, and even at this point white's attacking the rook on a8, but the b7 square is guarded by black's queen. So black is still down 2 pawns, but we'll see if he has compensation for it. Bishop to b7, attacking the queen with a discovered attack on the pawn on g2, and in turn a discovered attack on the trapped rook on h1. So all white can do now is a counterattack with knight to a3, which is best. Now, what should black play? Let's see. If bishop takes queen, knight takes queen, bishop takes g2 to discover the attack on the rook. White can play knight to c7 with a fork and a discovered attack on black's rook. However, the a8 square is still covered by the bishop, but black must lose tempo because of the check. So king c7, knight takes rook, bishop takes, and the knight can retreat. And both sides have 3 minor pieces and 1 rook. So surely black can do better than this. So after knight to a3, taking on the queen is a mistake and will waste a good position. Of course, black can simply retreat the queen to say a4, because then queen takes bishop with an attack on the rook. So the answer is simple. There's only one way: queen a6 to protect the bishop, and black still has the attack on the queen and discovered attack on the pawn and the rook. Now pawn to c6 was played, bishop takes. Finally the queen needs to move, queen to c5. At this point I can take on g2 and then the rook, and black will have a winning game with a material advantage. However, I complicate play with e6, which activates the bishop on f8 to discover the attack on the queen. White in turn plays a counterattack with knight to b5, threatening knight to c7 with a check and triple fork to regain the queen, which is probably the best move. Now let's see what black should play. Bishop takes queen, then knight c7 check, king moves, knight takes queen. However, black can recapture with knight takes knight, and black is up a minor piece, and this is of course winning for black. Can be played, of course. If bishop takes knight right away, black is up a minor piece, winning for black, but black has lost the discovered attack on g2 and h1. If bishop takes g2 at this point, we get the fork. King needs to move. White will take on the queen, and then bishop takes on the queen. Knight takes bishop, bishop takes rook. White is up, black is up an exchange. Not the best variation, but still winning for black. Best was queen to b7, which was played and covers the c7 square for the fork, and we are still threatening g2 and an attack on the queen. So queen to c4 to get out of the attack. Now again, if bishop g2, white can play a fork. So this isn't the best move, although it's very tempting to take on the g2 pawn. Bishop takes knight first, has to be played. The bishop is protected by the queen, so the queen needs to move. And at this point, the queen on b7 has taken over the role of the bishop with the attack on g2 and h1. So queen needs to move to g4 in order to protect the pawn on g2. And now queen to d5, there are other possibilities as well. Queen to d5 to attack the pawn with check. Knight f3 to protect the pawn. Knight to c6 brings in another attacker. Queen g5 still protecting the g2 pawn and adding in another defender for e5. But now queen to e4 check. Queen e3, white tries to trade off pieces. Queen to c2, which infiltrates white's rank with the queen on the second rank. Queen to d2, again trying to exchange the queens. And now knight to b4, a very nice move. And of course the knight cannot be recaptured, because if pawn takes knight, we get bishop takes pawn with an attack on the queen. And the bishop can be blocked or recaptured, because if queen takes bishop, the point is queen to e2 checkmate. So the aggressive knight to b4 was played. What else can white try? If queen takes queen, now we get a fork, losing for white. If white plays a random move like h3, the point of the knight move is knight to d3, check, with an attack on the bishop on c1. So king is forced to move to f1, and now knight takes bishop, and the knight is safe because of the discovered attack on the king. So a random move cannot be played. White tries a4 to chase away the bishop, but bishop can simply move to c4. And now black has been given a second attacking possibility, because there's no longer any protection for b3. So if at this point white plays a random move like h3, the knight move, knight e3 check, still works, but even stronger is queen e4 check. If queen e3, we get a fork, so that cannot be played. Of course, queen e2, we lose the queen immediately. Queen lost her mate. If king d1, which is the other option, now we can play bishop to b3, because b3 is no longer guarded, which lead in mate in 2 moves. So white has created even more problems for himself with the a4 pawn move. White tries queen to e3. So I continue with my original plan, knight to d3 check, attacking the bishop. And this more or less forces white to make drastic exchanges. Queen takes knight, queen takes d3, we're threatening mate. Knight to d4 to prevent mate. Bishop c5 to remove the defender. We're already in forced mate at this point. Bishop to d2 to create escape for the king. Bishop takes knight. King d1 to prevent queen e2 mate. Bishop to f2 to block the e-file for the enemy king. Rook a3, there are no defensive moves left. Rook a3 covers the b3 square for the check. But after queen to b1, bishop blocks, bishop to d3, threatening mate on c2, and there's nothing white can do to prevent this queen c2 mate. So I hope you enjoyed this game against the Hotbabe chess engine. using a variation of the Alekhine defense. Thanks for watching and have a great evening.